There is a mosaic on the wall of the oldest building in the galaxy. It sits in a temple carved into a cliff above an endless gray ocean, on a planet so remote that the path to it had been scattered across the stars in pieces and hidden. The image shows a figure seated in meditation. Around the figure, the stones are divided, dark on one side, pale on the other. But the figure in the center does not lean into either. It holds both. It sits exactly at the boundary where the two things meet, neither pulling toward the light nor shrinking from the dark. Luke Skywalker finds this mosaic in The Last Jedi, and he barely looks at it. He is too tired. He has seen too much. The Jedi Order he tried to rebuild from nothing is gone. His nephew destroyed it. He came to this remote island, specifically, to die on it, to let the Order end where it began. He wants to be the last one. He wants the thing finished. But the mosaic is still there, 25,000 years old, at least, still showing whoever built it standing in balance, at the place where two forces meet without one of them winning. The story of the Jedi Order is not a simple story of light defeating dark. It is something slower and stranger than that. The story of an institution that began with a profound piece of wisdom, spent thousands of years slowly forgetting that wisdom, and paid for that forgetting in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The tragedy of the Jedi is not that they fell. It is how much they already knew, at the very beginning, about what would bring them down. Welcome to Twin Suns. This one is long, and it goes deep. Get comfortable. Let us get into it. The planet Ahch-To does not have a name in the ancient records, because the ancient records do not exist. Not because they were lost, but because someone erased them deliberately. When Luke Skywalker set out to find the first Jedi Temple, in the years after the fall of the Empire, the map to Ahch-To had been divided into two pieces and hidden across the galaxy. One piece was stored inside R2-D2, dormant for decades. The other was held by an old traveler named Lor San Tekka on the remote desert planet of Jakku. The map had not been misplaced. It had been concealed. There is a difference, and it matters. What Luke found when he arrived was an island of gray stone and seagrass above a cold and ancient ocean, populated by small waddling creatures called porgs, and by a community of women called the Lanai, specifically the caretakers, who had maintained the grounds of the temple for generations without being Force-sensitive, without being Jedi, without fully understanding what it was they were tending. They kept the temple because the temple needed keeping. That was their entire reason. That was enough. The first Jedi Temple on Ahch-To is, in the current Star Wars canon, the oldest structure in the galaxy. It dates to approximately 25,025 BBY, before the Battle of Yavin. To put that number in context, the Galactic Republic would not be founded for another 1,000 years after this temple was built. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the one Anakin Skywalker burns through with his lightsaber at the beginning of his reign as Darth Vader, would not be constructed for another 24,000 years. The entire political history of the Star Wars galaxy, the Senate, the Chancellor, the Wars, the Empire, all of it, unfolds in the last fraction of a timeline that stretches back to this island. And what the founder of the Jedi Order built here was not a fortress, not a military outpost, not a place designed for the production of warriors. They built something closer to a monastery. The oldest known Jedi text, called the Ramagon, contains stories about the Prime Jedi, the name given to the founder of the Jedi Order, the figure rendered in the temple's central mosaic. We do not know the Prime Jedi's name. We do not know their species, their homeworld, or exactly how they came to understand the Force. What we know is what they left behind: a building, a practice, and an image. The mosaic is the most important thing. The Prime Jedi sits at the center of a circle divided equally between black stone and white stone. There is no fighting in this image, no weapon, no enemy to face. The figure simply sits, contained within both halves, belonging equally to both. The dark side and the light side of the Force are both present in this image, and they do not conflict. They complete each other. This is not the Jedi philosophy that Obi-Wan Kenobi passed down to Luke Skywalker in a hut on Tatooine. Obi-Wan taught Luke to reject the dark side completely, to choose the light, to protect himself from darkness as from a disease. That is a philosophy built for survival in a galaxy ruled by Darth Vader. It is understandable. It is even necessary in that context. But it is not what the Prime Jedi believed. The Prime Jedi believed something more demanding. They believed that the Force was whole. that light and dark were not enemies but partners, and that the Jedi's purpose was not to champion one over the other, but to stand at the meeting point between them, calm, grounded, neither consumed nor paralyzed. Think about what that requires of a person. It is not enough to resist darkness. It is not enough to pursue light. You have to be capable of holding both, of knowing the dark side exists within you and within the Force, without flinching, without running, without trying to destroy it. You have to be at peace with something that most people cannot even look at directly. The Prime Jedi apparently could. The Force Nexus on Ahch-To is the reason the temple was built there in the first place. A nexus is a place where the Force concentrates, where the boundary between the physical universe and the deeper energy beneath it grows thin and permeable. The one on Ahch-To is old enough and strong enough that Luke Skywalker can feel it from anywhere on the island. Rey feels it too when she arrives. She is drawn, specifically, to a cave beneath the island, a dark side nexus sitting within the larger Force concentration, a hole in the rock above the ocean where the dark side of the Force pools and sits like deep, cold water. She goes into it alone because Luke tells her not to, and inside, she finds only herself. No Sith Lord, no master villain, only her own reflection, multiplied into infinity, each image stretching away into darkness. That is the island, showing her what the Prime Jedi understood. The dark is not something outside you that you defeat. It is something inside you that you learn to know. Luke burned his opportunity on Ahch-To long before he arrived. He stood over his sleeping nephew with a lightsaber ignited for one terrifying second. Then he put it out. Then it was too late. He has spent years on this island, not meditating on what the Prime Jedi knew, but avoiding the memory of what he almost did. The distance between a second of temptation and the destruction of everything he built collapses every time he closes his eyes. And then Rey arrives, carrying the lightsaber that belonged to Anakin Skywalker, and asks him to come back, to teach her, to rebuild. He says no. He says the Jedi must end. He is not wrong about why. He is wrong about what to do with that knowledge. The order that the Prime Jedi built from this island survived for 25,000 years. It survived wars, schisms, the rise and fall of empires, the creation and near extinction of the Sith, and its own worst impulses. It was destroyed in a single night by its own former students, executing a plan that had been laid in secret for a decade. And the reason that plan worked, the reason no one in the entire Jedi Order saw it coming, goes back to something the Order had been getting wrong for a very long time. But to understand that, you need to go back further than Ahch-To, back before the Galactic Republic, back before the first starship, back to a time when the Force was still new to language, when the beings who could feel it had not yet decided what to do with it. Back to a planet called Tython, and an order whose name you probably do not know, and a philosophy that the Jedi spent thousands of years dismantling without realizing they were doing it. What happened on Tython is, in some ways, the most important story in this entire essay, because Tython is where the Jedi Order was not yet the Jedi Order, where it was still something truer, something that had not yet made the compromises that would define it. And the people who lived there understood the Force in a way that the prequel Jedi, for all their power and all their archives, never managed to recover. Before we can get to Tython, though, there is a distinction worth understanding. When Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, they made a decision about the enormous library of novels, comics, and games that had expanded the Star Wars universe for decades. They reclassified all of it. What had been official history became what is now called Legends, a parallel continuity, rich in detail, no longer binding on current filmmakers and showrunners, but not erased either. Still available, still worth knowing. The story of what came before the Jedi Order, on a planet at the center of the galaxy, belongs to the Legends continuity. The current canon has not confirmed it, but it has not contradicted it either, and the values it describes, the philosophy it portrays, the mistake it documents, are consistent with everything the current canon does confirm. Think of it as the deep past that the canon has not yet found the time to visit, but that casts its shadow forward across everything we can see. The planet is called Tython, and what happened there is where the Jedi Order truly begins. The story of the Jedi Order on Tython is told in a comic series called Dawn of the Jedi, written by John Ostrander and penciled by Jan Duursema. published by Dark Horse Comics, starting in 2012. 3 story arcs, Force Storm, The Prisoner of Bogan, and Force War, unfold across 15 issues, and together they constitute the most complete attempt anyone has made to imagine what the predecessors of the Jedi Order actually believed. The series is not widely read. It does not come up in most Star Wars conversations, but what it proposes about the origins of the Force tradition is startlingly coherent with what the current canon, decades later, has confirmed through Luke's Island and the Prime Jedi's Mosaic. The Dawn of the Jedi places the founding of the Jedi Order at 36,453 BBY, roughly 36,000 years before the events of A New Hope. This is not just ancient. This is so old that it exists outside the edge of what most Star Wars stories even attempt to visit. At this point in the timeline, there is no galactic republic. There is no hyperspace travel as a widespread technology. The galaxy is fragmented into isolated civilizations, most of them unable to reach each other across the dark between stars. And then, across the galaxy, 8 enormous triangular ships appear in orbit above 8 different worlds. These are the Odan-Urr. Nobody built them. Nobody knows where they came from. They simply arrive, hanging in space, broadcasting a call that only Force sensitives can hear, not through sound, but through something deeper, something felt in the center of the chest, in the place where intuition lives. Monks, scholars, wanderers, warriors, people from entirely different species on entirely different planets, none of them knowing about each other, all of them hearing the same signal at the same moment. The Talid monks of the Order of Dai Bendu on Ondo Prime are among the first to respond. Others follow from across the galaxy. The Odan-Urr gather them all, and then they carry them to the same destination, the planet Tython, deep in the heart of the galaxy. Tython is unlike any planet in the Star Wars universe. It is a world that is itself alive in the Force, not metaphorically, but functionally. When the balance of the Force is maintained on Tython, the planet is calm, green, temperate, alive with the kind of settled beauty that feels like a held breath. But when the Force falls out of balance on Tython's surface, when too much darkness concentrates in one place, or too much light, the planet responds. Storms rise from nothing. The ground opens. The atmosphere itself becomes hostile. Tython enforces equilibrium the way a body responds to infection, violently and without exception. It does not care whether the imbalance is caused by bad intentions or good ones. It simply reacts. The Force is out of balance. Correct it. The people gathered from across the galaxy by the Odan-Urr understand almost immediately what this planet is teaching them. They are standing on a world that punishes imbalance, not as a moral lesson, as a physical law. The planet is, in effect, the most rigorous teacher imaginable. It does not offer opinions or interpretations. It offers consequences. They form an order. They call themselves the Jedi, borrowing a phrase from the Dai Bendu monks who were among the first to arrive. The monks who identified the Odan-Urr's signal as a call from beyond ordinary experience. In the Dai Bendu language, the phrase translates approximately as mystic center, the center of things, the place where opposites meet and neither one overwhelms the other. The Jedi philosophy grows directly from Tython's reality. They honor both sides of the Force, naming them after the planet's twin moons. Ashla, the bright moon, representing the light side. Bogan, the dark moon, representing the dark. In the Jedi Order, neither moon is the enemy. A Jedi who falls too far toward Ashla, becoming too rigid, too controlled, too separated from natural feeling and natural darkness, is sent to meditate on Bogan until they find their way back to the center. A Jedi who falls too far toward Bogan, becoming angry, consumed, hungry for power over others, is sent to meditate on Ashla until they recover their peace. The journey is always toward the middle. The goal is always balance, not mastery of one side over the other. Sit with that for a moment. The Jedi did not consider the dark side evil. They considered imbalance dangerous. Those are not the same idea, and the distance between them is everything. If the dark side is evil, then the goal is to eliminate it, to purge it from yourself and your order and your galaxy. If imbalance is dangerous, then the goal is to know both sides well enough to stand between them without falling. The first philosophy produces warriors. The second produces something harder to name and much more difficult to achieve. The dawn of the Jedi comics follow a young Jedi named Ahch-To, a woman who hears the Force with unusual intensity, and the crisis that arrives from beyond Tython's skies in the form of a species called the Rakata. The Rakata are ancient and formidable, one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, builders of a hyperspace network that connects star systems across tens of thousands of light years. But their technology is not neutral. Their version of hyperspace travel runs on the dark side of the Force. They consume it, they refine it, and when the dark side in a system runs dry, the system goes with it. They send Force hounds ahead of them, Force sensitives conscripted into service, their power bent into a tracking instrument that finds strong nexuses of the Force so the Rakata can come harvest them. One such Force hound, a man named Zesh, is dispatched to Tython. When Zesh arrives, Tython responds to the darkness he carries. Storms, earthquakes, the planet screaming in the Force. The Jedi respond to the crisis while their world tears itself apart around them. What they discover in the fight against the Rakata is the same thing that every iteration of the Jedi Order will discover in every war it fights for the next 36,000 years. That the dark side is seductive precisely when the need for it is most real. When the battle is desperate enough, when the cost of restraint is lives rather than principles, the choice to go to the dark side feels not like a betrayal, but like a necessity. The rationalization is always available. The need is always genuine. The power is always right there, and it is always bigger than what the light can offer at that specific, urgent, terrible moment. Some Jedi go to the dark side in the fight against the Rakata. They tell themselves it is temporary. It is necessary. They will come back from it when the crisis is over. The Force wars that follow are the consequence of that bargain. They are the internal conflict the Jedi cannot avoid, the clash between those who remain committed to balance and those who, having gone to Bogan in the crisis, find that Bogan will not let them leave. The Force wars divide Tython. They resolve, after enormous violence and enormous loss, with a kind of victory for the light side faction. The survivors become the Jedi, the practitioners of the light, and they carry their tradition forward. But notice what they have lost. In winning the Force Wars, the Jedi have abandoned the Jedi's central proposition. The Jedi believed balance was the goal. The Jedi, after the Force Wars, believe the light side is the goal. The balance they were founded to maintain has been replaced by something that looks like clarity. The firm conviction that the light is right and the dark is wrong, and the task is to maximize one and suppress the other. The Jedi Order becomes the Jedi Order by losing the argument it was built around. That loss echoes forward. It echoes through every philosophical revision the Order makes in the millennia that follow. It echoes through Odan-Urr's rewritten code. It echoes through the prequel Jedi Council's confident belief that a trained Jedi feels nothing that needs acknowledging. It echoes all the way to the moment Anakin Skywalker's grief about his mother turns into something no one in his order taught him to contain, because no one in his order admitted that grief was real. The Jedi got it right, the Force Wars took it from them, and the Jedi Order spent the next 35,000 years building an institution on the assumption that the loss was actually a gain. There is a moment in the dawn of the Jedi comics that deserves to be described, even quietly. It is not the biggest battle in the series. It is not the most dramatic confrontation. It is a quiet scene before the war begins. Ahch-To stands on a cliff above the ocean. Tython is calm that day, the Force in balance. Ashla and Bogan both visible in the sky above her. She can feel both moons the way you feel temperature. Ashla as warmth, Bogan as something cool and deep and present. Neither moon threatens her. Both are real. She is not choosing between them. She is just standing there, feeling both of them, not afraid of either. That is the whole lesson, the entire philosophy of the Jedi, in one image. A person standing in balance on a cliff above the ocean, under two moons, not afraid. The Jedi Order spends 25,000 years trying to get back to that cliff. And the measure of its failure is how long it takes, and how much it costs. And the fact that when it finally does get back there, it is not a trained Jedi Master standing under two moons. It is Rey, a scavenger, a person the Order never touched. But there are many chapters between Tython and Rey, and the next one begins with a schism so profound that it does not just divide the Jedi Order. It creates something entirely new. something that will outlast the Order itself, and outlast every civilization the Order helps build, and be waiting in the dark when the Order finally falls. Approximately 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, still thousands of years before anything we recognize from the films, there is a schism within the Jedi Order. It does not happen all at once. It grows over years, maybe decades, the way a fracture grows through stone under pressure. Invisible at first, then visible, then catastrophic. A group of Jedi begin to practice something the Order has forbidden, not casual experimentation, but deep, sustained work with the dark side of the Force, specifically the ability to reshape life itself. The dark side, when accessed at sufficient depth, can do something the light side cannot do in the same way. It can bend the pattern of living things. It can corrupt, take an existing creature and twist it into something new, something larger, something built for violence. These Jedi are not simply dabbling, they are making armies. The conflict that follows is known in the Legends continuity as the 100-Year Darkness. The current canon acknowledges that this period exists, but has not detailed it with the same depth that the old expanded universe did. What both continuities agree on is the basic shape. A group of dark side Jedi went to war with the Order and the Republic. This war lasted approximately a century, and it ended with the Dark Jedi's defeat at a battle on a planet called Korbos. The Battle of Korbos is not their surrender. They fight there, and they lose there, and the Jedi capture what remains of them. The defeat is total. The Dark Jedi's armies are scattered. Their leaders are in chains. And then the Jedi do something that will define the next several thousand years of galactic history. They do not execute them. They exile them. The defeated Dark Jedi, dozens of them, perhaps more, are stripped of their ranks, stripped of their lightsabers, stripped of everything that marked them as members of the Order. They are put on ships. The ships are launched into unknown space. The Jedi wash their hands of the problem. They have won. The Dark Jedi are gone. The war is over. This needs to be stated plainly. The Jedi Order created the Sith by choosing something that felt like mercy. There is an argument that exile was both more humane than execution and more politically feasible. The Dark Jedi had supporters, had families. The galaxy would not have accepted a mass execution without trial. But the outcome of the exile is not something the Jedi can claim not to have foreseen. You take a group of warriors who hate you, who are powerful in the Force, who believe they are right, and you send them into the unknown. What did anyone think would happen? The ships carrying the exiles drift for a long time. They travel through the outer reaches of the galaxy, through regions with no charts and no trade lanes, through space that no Republic survey vessel has ever mapped, and eventually they find a world. The world is called Korriban. In the current canon, it is sometimes called Moraband, the name used in the Clone Wars when Yoda visits it in the show's 6th season. It is a desolate planet, red dust, ancient tombs carved into cliffs, a darkness in the Force so dense it feels physical, like pressure behind the eyes. Korriban does not welcome visitors. It feels like a place where things have died, and the dying has not entirely stopped. And it is not uninhabited. The Sith species, the Sith people, the original Sith, before that word meant anything beyond an ethnic identity, are a humanoid species with red skin, bone spurs, facial tentacles, and a natural attunement to the dark side of the Force that borders on the instinctive. They are not Jedi. They did not study the Force academically, but they feel it, deeply and viscerally, and they have built a civilization on that connection. A civilization structured around power, hierarchy, and the worship of strength in its most direct form. Their kings are Force users. Their priests channel the dark side. Their cultural memory is saturated with the Force's darker dimensions. When the Dark Jedi arrive on Korriban, the Sith species sees something remarkable. Beings who know the Force even more deeply than they do. Who can do things with the dark side that the Sith have never imagined. The Dark Jedi, for their part, see something they desperately need. A people willing to receive them, to follow them, to call them gods. The strongest among the Dark Jedi exiles, a man named Ahch-To, who had been a Jedi Master before the Schism and who led the Dark Forces at the Battle of Korbos, steps forward into the power structure the Sith species has waiting. He becomes the first Dark Lord of the Sith, not as a title he creates, but as one the Sith species already had, already waiting for someone powerful enough to fill it. Ahch-To is buried in Korriban's tombs after his death, and the remarkable thing, the thing that makes him more than just a historical villain, is what happens to him afterward. His spirit remains in the tomb, trapped in it, for thousands of years. When a Force-sensitive traveler visits the tomb much later in the history the Legends continuity tells, Ahch-To's ghost is still there, still present, still confused. He tells the visitor that he cannot remember his name, his real name, the one he had before he became a Sith Lord. The identity he built on Korriban consumed the identity he carried from the Jedi Order so completely that at the end of his existence, he cannot tell you who he was before. That is not a small thing. That is the cost of what the 100-year darkness started. Not just an empire, not just a war, but the complete transformation of a person into something they did not begin as. A Jedi Master, presumably someone who believed in the light side, who studied the Force, who trained Padawans, and sat in the archives and understood something about the nature of the universe. Gone. Replaced so thoroughly by the Sith Lord that even the ghost cannot find the original underneath. Over the centuries after Ahch-To, the exiled Jedi and the Sith species interbreed. Their cultures merge. Their power grows. The Force traditions the Dark Jedi brought from the Jedi Order mix with the older, rawer practices of the Sith people, and what emerges is something new. A philosophy of domination, of power as the only true measure of worth, of survival as the ultimate virtue. The Sith Empire expands outward from Korriban to neighboring worlds. The planet remains the spiritual center, the place of the great tombs, the tradition being that every Sith Lord powerful enough to be remembered gets a tomb there, and the darkness in their tomb remains active long after they are gone. The Jedi Order, in the Republic at the galaxy's core, does not know any of this is happening. Hyperspace exploration in this era is limited. The outer reaches of the galaxy remain unmapped. The exiles went into the dark, and the Republic closed the door and assumed that was the end of the story. It is never the end of the story. The next time the Republic and the Jedi encounter what has been growing in the dark, it is not a small conflict. It is the Great Hyperspace War, a clash that begins around 5000 BBY, when two Republic hyperspace explorers stumble into Sith space by accident and bring the Sith Empire back with them, not as refugees or scouts, as an invasion force led by a Dark Lord named Naga Sato who believes the time has come to take back what the Jedi denied the Dark Jedi at Korbos. The war is catastrophic. The Sith Empire strikes at Republic worlds. The Jedi fight back. The Republic survives, barely, and the Sith are defeated, but not destroyed. Never quite destroyed. Something always survives. And something always comes back. What the 100-year darkness leaves in its wake, what echoes forward through every conflict the Republic and the Jedi will ever fight, is not just a civilization built on the dark side, though that is dangerous enough. It is a proof of concept, a demonstration that the dark side can be the foundation of something that lasts. That darkness does not merely corrupt and consume, but can build, sustain, grow, outlast. The Sith Empire lasts for thousands of years. It survives wars and defeats and its own internal violence. It is a real civilization, with history and art and philosophy and architecture, all of it saturated with darkness, all of it oriented around power, but real. The Jedi keep expecting darkness to destroy itself. The Jedi keep being wrong about that. The Jedi exiled the darkness, and the darkness became stronger in exile. They would make the same mistake again. The pattern of the Jedi's history is not heroism and tragedy alternating cleanly. It is the same error, made at larger scales, with longer consequences, over thousands of years. And the error always begins with the same impulse, the belief that if you can remove the darkness from sight, you have dealt with it. The darkness disagrees. There is one more thing that needs to be said about the 100-year darkness before this chapter closes, and it is the thing nobody wants to say about it. The Dark Jedi who started it were not wrong about the Force. They were wrong about what to do with what they understood. The Force does allow life to be reshaped through the dark side. The dark side does grant access to power. The light side cannot match in the same way. Both things are true. The Dark Jedi did not fabricate these discoveries. They found real things in the Force, things that were real and were always there, and they applied those things in ways that demanded the suffering of others. The knowledge was accurate. The application was catastrophic. This distinction matters because it means the Jedi Order's response, which was to declare those practices forbidden, to wall off the dark side entirely, to exile everyone who had touched it, was not a response to a false discovery. It was a response to a real discovery by shutting the door. And shutting the door on something real does not make the real thing go away. It makes it someone else's secret. Before we can understand why the Jedi kept repeating this pattern, why the most powerful Force-using organization in galactic history kept failing to reckon with the thing it was supposed to understand better than anyone, we need to look at something that happened not in the great external wars, but inside the Jedi Order itself. Something quiet, something that looked, at the time, like wisdom. A philosopher and teacher sat down to rewrite the code that the Jedi lived by, and the change he made was so small that you might miss it if you were not looking carefully. The word he removed was only 3 letters long, but it was doing everything. The original Jedi code is a riddle. Emotion, yet peace. Ignorance, yet knowledge. Passion, yet serenity. Chaos, yet harmony. Death, yet the Force. That is what it said. Not the version Yoda whispers to younglings in the prequels. Not the version Obi-Wan recites. The original. The first version. The one that predates the formal institution of the Jedi Order as we recognize it. The code that the early Jedi lived by when the Force was still something they were discovering, rather than something they already thought they understood. Read it carefully. It does not say emotion is wrong. It says, there is emotion, and there is peace. Both things exist. Both are real. The word yet is doing something important in each line, acknowledging the tension between two things rather than resolving the tension by eliminating one of them. The original code is honest about the friction. It says I feel emotion, and I also find peace within that emotion, not by erasing it, but by holding it. I experience passion, and I also cultivate serenity, not in the absence of passion, but alongside it. I encounter chaos, and I also know harmony, not by pretending chaos does not exist, but by finding the structure within it. This is a demanding philosophy. It requires you to be honest about what you feel. It requires you to maintain balance not by suppressing half of your experience but by containing all of it, the way the Prime Jedi's Mosaic contains both the dark stone and the light stone without either one winning. It is the philosophy of Tython, translated into words. It is what the Jedi believed, codified, and then a Jedi master named Odan-Urr changed it. Odan-Urr lived during what is called the Mandaron period in the Legends continuity, a time roughly 5,000 or more years before the Battle of Yavin, placing him deep in the Old Republic era. He was a Jedi librarian and philosopher, known for his extraordinary longevity and his dedication to the academic study of the Force. He was not primarily a warrior. He was a scholar. He looked at the Jedi code as it had been passed down, and he found it unsatisfying. His students were struggling with the word yet. They could not hold the tension the original code acknowledged. They kept falling to one side or the other, either indulging the emotion or over-suppressing it, either lost in passion or stripped of feeling entirely. The original code was hard to practice. It required a kind of simultaneous awareness that most people, even Force-sensitive people, found difficult to maintain. So Odan-Urr rewrote it. The version he produced is the one you know. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. The word yet is gone. In its place, there is no. Emotion does not exist alongside peace. Emotion does not exist at all. Ignorance is not something to move through toward knowledge. Ignorance simply does not exist in the Jedi. Passion, the deep, driving force of motivation and attachment and love and grief, is simply absent. The tension in the original code has been replaced by a declaration. The friction has been resolved not by learning to hold it, but by declaring that one side of it is not real. This is not balance. This is subtraction. The new code asks the Jedi not to hold both sides of their experience, but to eliminate one side, to feel nothing that needs managing, to be immune to the specifically human conditions, love, grief, anger, desire, the need to protect what you care about, that give a life its weight. And it worked, in the sense that it produced Jedi who were reliably controlled, consistently decisive, emotionally stable in combat and in council, in the sense that it built an institution that could function across thousands of years and across the breadth of a galaxy with tens of thousands of civilizations without constant internal conflict. Odan-Urr's code was extraordinarily effective at producing a certain kind of Jedi. The question is whether that kind of Jedi is actually better. The question is whether the elimination of acknowledged feeling produces wisdom or produces a void where wisdom used to live. The history of the Order answers this question with brutal clarity. What Odan-Urr's code produced, over thousands of years, was Jedi who did not know themselves. Jedi who had been trained since childhood to deny their own emotional reality so completely that by adulthood they could no longer read it accurately. The feelings were still there. The code could not actually remove them, only declare them absent. But they had been driven underground, made shameful, given no legitimate channel. A Jedi who felt grief was not taught to grieve. They were taught that what they were feeling was not grief, because there is no emotion, there is peace. A Jedi who felt love was not taught to love wisely. They were taught that what they were feeling was a path to the dark side. When Anakin Skywalker falls in love with Padme Amidala, he cannot tell her openly. Not only because the relationship is against the Order's rules, but because he has spent his entire training being told that the feeling is not real, is not valid, is not something a Jedi acknowledges. He buries it. It grows in the dark. When he starts having visions of Padme dying in childbirth, he is already so disconnected from his own emotional life that he cannot find a master he trusts enough to tell. He cannot go to Obi-Wan. He cannot go to Mace Windu. He cannot go to Yoda, who would likely respond with a gentle redirect back to non-attachment. He goes, eventually, to Palpatine, the one person in his life who has consistently acknowledged that Anakin's feelings are real, who has never told him to suppress them, who has always said, in effect, that what you feel matters and you are right to feel it. Palpatine wins Anakin Skywalker because the Jedi Order spent 20 years telling Anakin his feelings did not exist. This is not a small thing. This is the core of it. The revision Odan-Urr made to the code thousands of years before Anakin was born is the reason the Rule of Two works. It is the reason a single Sith Lord, patient enough and perceptive enough, can dismantle the entire Jedi Order from the inside using nothing but the Jedi's own emotional repression as a weapon. He does not defeat them with raw power. Palpatine is powerful, but so are Mace Windu and Yoda and the other senior members of the Council. He defeats them with the gap they have spent thousands of years refusing to look at. He defeats them with all the things they were trained not to acknowledge. There is a moment in Attack of the Clones that needs to be held clearly in the mind. Anakin has been having nightmares about his mother for weeks. He knows she is in pain. He knows she is in danger. He goes to Padme and he tells her, and his telling is not asking for permission or asking for advice. It is begging someone to acknowledge that the thing he feels is real, that the love he has for his mother is not a weakness, that caring is not a violation of his principles. Padme says he should tell the Council. Anakin knows what the Council will say. He goes to Tatooine alone. He finds his mother in a Tusken camp, dying of wounds inflicted over days of captivity. She dies in his arms. She opens her eyes, sees him, says she knew he would come, and then she is gone. And the thing he feels in that moment, grief that has nowhere to go, a lifetime of suppressed attachment erupting at once, the love that the code told him was not real crashing into the fact that its object is dead. He takes all of it out on the Tusken Raiders who took her, all of them. He returns to the camp and he does not stop. He comes back covered in it, and he confesses to Padme, and she holds him, because she is the only person in his life who has ever consistently acknowledged that what he feels is real. The Sith did not create Darth Vader. The Code of Odan-Urr did. Palpatine was just paying attention. There is a version of Star Wars where none of this happens. In that version, Anakin is trained in the original code. In that version, he is taught that his emotion is real, that his love for his mother is real, that the grief of her death is something to be held and processed rather than denied and detonated. In that version, he has the emotional vocabulary to tell Obi-Wan about the visions, to trust the Order with his fear, to find within the Jedi tradition the resources to survive what the Force is showing him. Palpatine offers nothing he does not already have, and the Empire never happens. That is a very different story, and once you see it, You cannot unsee it. What the original Jedi and the Prime Jedi understood, and what the Jedi Order systematically removed from its own teachings over millennia, is that the dark side of the Force is not an external enemy. It is the Force's own shadow, the dimension of emotion and passion and attachment and grief and rage that exists in every being who has ever drawn breath. You cannot exile the dark side. You cannot suppress it out of existence. You cannot build a code that declares it does not exist and expect that code to protect you from it. You can only know it, hold it, stand at the center of it, the way the Prime Jedi stood in that mosaic, dark on one side, light on the other, neither one in control. The Jedi forgot that, and the galaxy paid. 200 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, the Jedi Order is at the height of its institutional power. This is the era that the current Star Wars publishing initiative has spent several years exploring under the banner of the High Republic, a multimedia project launched in 2021 that spans novels, comics, and the Disney Plus series The Acolyte, all set in the centuries before we arrive at Coruscant with a young Obi-Wan Kenobi and a 9-year-old boy from Tatooine. The first Phase 1 novel, Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, published in January 2021, establishes this era immediately with a catastrophic event called the Great Disaster, a devastating hyperspace accident that sends a destroyed cargo ship fragmenting out of hyperspace at random locations across the galaxy, each fragment capable of wiping out a world. The Jedi respond. Multiple Jedi across the galaxy link themselves together through the Force, a technique that requires every one of them to be perfectly in sync, to feel each other across vast distances, to move as a single coordinated will, and they catch the fragments together. They stop a catastrophe that no individual Jedi could have stopped alone. It is the single most impressive display of collective Jedi power shown anywhere in the current canon, and it is the first thing we see this era do. The Jedi of the High Republic are a different creature than the Jedi of the prequels. They are louder, more confident, more willing to feel. Avar Kriss, one of the defining Jedi of Phase 1, a master known for her ability to harmonize with other Force users the way a conductor harmonizes an orchestra, is openly moved by beauty. She hears the Force as music. The connection she feels when the Jedi link together in the Great Disaster response is described in Light of the Jedi as a chorus, each Jedi a voice, the whole something enormous and coherent. She feels it in her chest. The code tells her there is no emotion, but Avar Kriss has emotion, and it is the source of her power, not a corruption of it. She is exceptional. The narrative is careful to establish that she is exceptional, that most Jedi of this era are more controlled, more shaped by the institutional code, more recognizably Jedi as the prequels depict them. But the fact that a character like Avar Kriss is possible, is celebrated, is admired by her peers, suggests that the wall Odan-Urr built between the Jedi and their feelings is not entirely impermeable in this era. There are cracks. Through those cracks, something closer to the original Jedi philosophy still breathes. The High Republic faces two major antagonist forces. The first is the Nihil, a pirate collective whose raids are organized not by brute force, but by the strategic exploitation of stolen hyperspace paths. They strike from nowhere, reach systems that should be unreachable, and disappear before the Republic can respond. Their leader, Marchion Ro, is more than a pirate chief. He is a strategist nursing a centuries-old grievance, positioning himself to be the one who finally does to the Jedi what every enemy of the Order has attempted and failed. He possesses a weapon unlike anything the Order has encountered, creatures from another dimension of reality, beings of pure shadow and predatory appetite, which the Jedi come to call the Nameless. When a Jedi encounters a Nameless, they lose everything. The connection to the Force goes first, severed instantly, replaced by absolute silence. Then comes the fear, not ordinary combat fear, but something primal and consuming. The fear of nothingness, of being completely alone in the universe, with no force to feel and no ground beneath the sensation. Jedi who have faced the Nameless describe the experience as death without dying. Some of them do not recover. Some of them do not survive the encounter. And the ones who are touched long enough fossilize, literally turn to stone, the body of a living Jedi calcified from the inside out, while the mind is still present. The Jedi have never been this afraid of anything. They are trained not to fear. They have centuries of teaching behind them about how to face darkness without flinching. And the Nameless takes all of that and removes it in an instant, leaving only the terror underneath. This is the most revealing thing the Nihil threat does to the Order. It exposes the vulnerability that the Code created. Jedi trained to suppress fear have not actually eliminated fear. They have simply buried it very deeply and placed a very heavy thing on top. When the Nameless takes away the Force, the thing that every Jedi has been taught to equate with peace, with certainty, with the settled ground of their entire existence, the fear that was buried is still there, intact, waiting, experienced in full, without any of the tools the Jedi were taught to use against it. The Jedi of the High Republic fight the Nihil. They suffer. They lose Starlight Beacon, the great symbol of the era, the space station that represented the Republic's and the Jedi's commitment to bringing light to the Outer Rim. In the final Phase 1 novel, The Fallen Star, by Claudia Gray, published in January 2022. The Nihil bring it down from the inside, through betrayal, through a wound in the Order's trust of its own people. It falls. People die in it. The great symbol of the High Republic's hope falls into a gas giant, and the era begins its slow turn toward winter. The Jedi survive this. The Order continues. 200 years of further history separate Starlight Beacon's fall from the moment Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi step out of a Republic cruiser and onto the deck of a Trade Federation battleship. But the High Republic project, in documenting this era in such detail, is doing something important. It is showing us what the Jedi looked like at the top of their arc, the point from which everything after is a descent. The Jedi at their best, the Avar Krises and the Stellan Geoses, and the rest of the generation that gave everything to the Great Disaster and the Nihil War, are genuinely admirable. They are good people doing good work. The tragedy is not that they fail. The tragedy is that the institution they serve, however admirable its individual members, has structural flaws that no amount of individual virtue can compensate for. The second antagonist force the High Republic era reveals is subtler and more troubling than the Nihil. It is not a pirate fleet or a dimensional predator. It is the Jedi Order's own blind spots, the places where the Code and the Council and the long habit of authority have created not wisdom but certainty, and where certainty has calcified into an inability to ask the questions that most need asking. That blind spot is what the Acolyte begins to explore, and it does so by placing us 100 years later, in the final days of the High Republic, with the Jedi at their most confident and at their most vulnerable. There is a specific kind of danger that comes from being right for a very long time. The Jedi, at the end of the High Republic era, have been right for centuries. They have been the guardians of peace. They have been the protectors of the weak. They have not been seriously challenged in their self-understanding for generations. And an institution that has not been seriously challenged in its self-understanding for generations has, by definition, stopped examining itself. It has confused the absence of challenge with the presence of correctness. That confusion is going to be very expensive. The Acolyte is a television series created by Leslie Headland for Disney+, set approximately 100 years before the events of The Phantom Menace, the end of the High Republic era, the generation just before the galaxy the prequels show us. It premiered on June 4, 2024. Disney canceled it in August of 2024, after a single season of 8 episodes. That cancellation tells its own story, and we will get to it. But first, what the show was actually doing. The Acolyte follows twin sisters named May and Osha, played by Amandla Stenberg. One was raised as a Jedi Padawan. One was not. They were born on an Outer Rim planet called Brendok, in a community of witches, women who used the Force through a tradition entirely separate from the Jedi Order, a tradition tied to nature and to a concept called the Thread, which understands the Force not as a war between light and dark, but as a connective tissue binding all living things. The Jedi arrived at that community when the twins were children. They tested the girls, found them Force-sensitive, and took Osha away to train. May was left behind. The event that separates them is a fire. The witches' settlement burns. Most of the community dies, including the twins' mother, a woman named Anastasia who led the Coven, and who understood the Force with a depth that the Jedi who came to test her daughters could not recognize, because it did not look like what they were trained to look for. The official Jedi account of this event is that May started the fire. May's account is that the Jedi did. Amandla Stenberg plays both women with remarkable precision, two people who grew from the same origin, shaped entirely differently by where they ended up. Osha trained in the Jedi Order's culture of detachment. She learned to hold the Force the Jedi way, controlled, disciplined, focused through the lens of the Code. May was not trained by the Jedi. She was trained by a Sith Lord, and by her own rage, and by years of surviving alone, with both of those things as her only resources. By the time they find each other again, neither of them fully trusts the story she has been told about who she is, who her sister is, and what actually happened that night on Brendok. The Jedi Master at the center of the investigation is Sol, played by Lee Jung-jae. Sol is not a bad man. He is one of the more genuinely compassionate Jedi shown in the series. He loves his students, remembers them, carries them. When the series begins, he is investigating a series of murders of Jedi Masters. The murders are being committed by May, who has been trained to kill the specific masters involved in the events on Brendok. As Sol investigates, as the full picture of what happened that night emerges, he is faced with something the Code has no provision for. The possibility that he caused this, that his choices, made with good intentions, produced a monster by destroying what the monster loved. He cannot fully face it, not because he is cowardly, he is demonstrably brave, but because the Jedi Code does not give him the vocabulary for reckoning with his own harm. There is no version of the Code that says, you did something with good intentions that had catastrophic consequences for people you did not know were people, and now you need to sit with that, to grieve it, to understand it as yours, before you can do anything useful about it. There is no framework in what he was taught for holding his own guilt without either defending himself or collapsing under it. Sol is a Jedi who genuinely loves his students and genuinely cannot see his own role in what broke. He is not evil. He is something the show finds more troubling than evil. He is a man who has been right so many times and in so many ways that being wrong has become structurally impossible for him to process. The show does not comment on this. It does not add music to tell you how to feel. It just shows you Sol, over and over, in the gap between what he believes about himself and what the evidence demonstrates. The Sith Lord of this era goes by the name Kimir, played by Manny Jacinto. He is not a traditional Sith villain, not a screaming tyrant, not a rage engine, not a war machine in black armor. He is patient, soft-spoken, specific about what he wants and why. His philosophy, as he articulates it over the course of the season, is essentially the inverse of the Jedi Code. He believes that attachment is not weakness, but truth, that the desire to protect what you love is the most honest thing in the Force, and that the Jedi's suppression of that desire has not produced wisdom, but has instead produced a kind of moral numbness, a willingness to cause harm while telling yourself the harm is for the greater good, a willingness to make decisions about people's lives while remaining emotionally insulated from the consequences of those decisions. He is not wrong about the diagnosis. He is building an apprentice out of someone he has isolated and traumatized and whose grief he is exploiting. The treatment he proposes for the Jedi's pathology is its own form of violence, but the diagnosis is accurate. What the Acolyte is doing, in the 8 episodes it got to make, is showing us the generation just before the Jedi fall into the complacency that Palpatine exploits. The show is positioned 100 years before the Phantom Menace, which means it is set in the world that produces the Jedi Council that Qui-Gon argues with, that produces Mace Windu's certainty, that produces the Order that cannot conceive of a Sith Lord sitting in the Chancellor's office because Sith have been extinct for 1,000 years and the Jedi know these things. That absolute certainty, the certainty of an institution that has been right for a very long time and has stopped checking whether it might sometimes be wrong, does not appear overnight. It is cultivated. It is the product of generations of being told you are the light in the darkness, until eventually you stop asking whether you might sometimes be the darkness. The Acolyte's cancellation after 1 season means we will never see where Leslie Headland's story was going. We have 8 episodes of a narrative designed to span multiple seasons, ending at a point where the threads are unresolved, where the implications of what was established are only beginning to unfold. What we can say is this: the show was trying to do something genuinely difficult. It was trying to make you sympathize with the perspective that the Jedi Order, the institution most Star Wars storytelling presents as unambiguously good, causes harm. Real harm. The kind of harm that creates the darkness it claims to be fighting. That argument is uncomfortable. It made some audiences angry. There is a version of watching The Acolyte where you see the witches of Brendok destroyed by Jedi intervention and feel nothing, because the code has convinced you, as it convinced the Jedi themselves, that Force users who do not follow the Jedi way are automatically suspect. There is another version where you see the same scenes and understand that a civilization with an entirely valid relationship to the Force was dismantled because it did not fit the Jedi's template, and that the violence that followed was not inevitable, but was produced, specifically, by the Jedi's inability to recognize legitimacy outside their own tradition. That is the version the show was made for, and it is the version that follows directly from everything the Jedi Order understood, and the Jedi forgot. Whether or not a second season of The Acolyte ever gets made, and as of now the answer from Disney is no, the season that exists is a document of what the Jedi Order looked like at the moment just before the crack became a break. Confident, well-intentioned, genuinely trying to do good, and producing harm in the gaps between their intentions and their blind spots, as institutions always do, especially when they have convinced themselves that their intentions are pure enough to replace their accountability. The next century, the 100 years between the Acolyte and the Phantom Menace, the Jedi spend in that same mode, confident, present, visible, sitting on the Jedi Council in the Temple on Coruscant, issuing pronouncements about the nature of the Force and the condition of the galaxy, unaware that something has been growing in the dark, patient and invisible, for the entire millennium since the Sith were supposed to have been destroyed. That something has been growing in the dark, directly beneath their feet. Let us talk about where the Jedi lived. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant is one of the defining images of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. 5 distinctive spires rising above the planet city's skyline, visible from space, recognizable across 1,000 years of galactic political life. The temple houses the Jedi Archives, one of the most comprehensive libraries in the known galaxy, a repository of star charts and historical records and Force lore accumulated over millennia. It houses training rooms where younglings learn to deflect laser bolts with their eyes closed. It houses personal quarters for thousands of Jedi, greenhouses and healing wings, and the Chamber of Judgment, where Jedi could be called to account for violations of the Order's rules. At its crown, the 5 spires look down on the sprawl of Coruscant, the city that covers an entire planet, the capital of a civilization that spans the galaxy. The temple was built approximately 1,000 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, the same general period that would see the near extinction of the Sith and the beginning of the Rule of Two. 1,000 years of unbroken Jedi presence in that building. 1,000 years of that skyline. Generations of younglings who looked up at those spires and understood, through the simple fact of their permanence, that the Order was eternal, that its authority was settled, that the galaxy was structured around this institution and its values, the way a solar system is structured around its star. But under the temple, there is something older, something the Jedi built their home on top of without fully reckoning with what it means to do that. The Coruscant Jedi Temple was built on a site of ancient significance, a location where the dark side of the Force concentrates, where a Sith shrine predating the temple's construction had been established by those who understood what the ground there was. The Sith knew about this site, they had worked with it, and the Jedi, in choosing that location for their headquarters, were either claiming it symbolically, planting the flag of the light side on a Sith holy place, or were simply unaware that the ground they were building on was already consecrated to something they opposed. Either interpretation is uncomfortable. If the Jedi knew what was beneath their temple and built there deliberately, they were engaging in a kind of spiritual overwriting, trying to cover the darkness with the light, to erase the Sith's claim on the site by establishing a stronger one. This is a way of handling darkness that the Jedi practiced often, covering it, claiming it, building over it. It is not the same as understanding it or addressing its source. In this case, it did not work. The dark side nexus beneath the temple did not go away because the Jedi built on top of it. It remained, active and present, beneath the floors where younglings slept, and Jedi masters meditated, and the High Council convened to make decisions about the fate of the galaxy. If the Jedi did not know, if the choice of that location was simply the choice of a powerful Force nexus, and the dark side nature of what was already there was not detected or was dismissed, that is its own kind of revelation. The order that was supposed to be most attuned to the Force built its headquarters on a Sith shrine and did not notice, or did not look. Darth Sidious noticed. He spent decades on Coruscant before anyone knew his name. He rose through the political structure of the Republic, first as a senator from Naboo, then as Supreme Chancellor, and he spent all of that time looking across the city at the 5 spires of the Jedi Temple, aware of what was beneath them, aware that the Jedi were sitting on top of a reservoir of dark side energy they had convinced themselves they had contained. Whether he actively fed that reservoir, whether he used it as a weapon to slowly weaken the Jedi's connection to the light, is difficult to establish with certainty. What is certain is that the arrangement pleased him, that the Jedi had made themselves comfortable directly above his domain. The rule of 2 that Darth Bane established approximately 1,000 years before the prequels is the strategic architecture that made this possible. By most accounts, Bane was born in 1026 BBY on a mining planet called Apatros. He came up through the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness, a large, chaotic collective of Sith Lords who had been fighting the Jedi and the Republic for years, each one hungry for dominance, each one accumulating followers at the expense of the others. The Brotherhood was powerful. It was also destroying itself. Dozens of Sith Lords competing for supremacy. The dark side's power scattered across scores of individuals instead of concentrated. The collective constantly weakened by its own internal violence. Bane understood that this was not a philosophy. It was entropy. The Sith, in their lust for power over each other, were consuming the very power they were fighting over. He proposed something radical. 2 Sith, only ever 2. A master and an apprentice. The master holds the accumulated knowledge and power. The apprentice hungers for it, is shaped by that hunger, grows stronger through it. When the apprentice becomes strong enough to defeat the master, they do. And then they take an apprentice of their own. The chain of 2 continues, each link stronger than the last, the total power of the dark side concentrated rather than diffused. The Battle of Ruusan, fought approximately 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, was the last open conflict between the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Jedi Order. The Brotherhood lost. Most of the Sith died, not in combat alone, but in the battle's final extraordinary act, when one of their own number detonated a weapon of unprecedented force power that consumed everyone in range. The Brotherhood of Darkness was gone. The Sith were, as far as anyone could tell, extinct. Bane survived. The details of how are cleaner in some versions of the story than others, but the essential fact is that Darth Bane walked away from Ruusan while everyone else did not. He took an apprentice, a young woman named Zannah, and he disappeared into the galaxy. The Jedi believed, after Ruusan, that the Sith were finished. This belief was not mere optimism. It was stated as established fact. The archives contained no record of Sith activity in the centuries between Ruusan and the Phantom Menace. The Jedi holocrons, the most comprehensive records of Force history available to the Order, documented the Brotherhood's destruction without documenting its survival. When Mace Windu says, in The Phantom Menace, that the Sith have been extinct for a millennium, he is not guessing. He is citing the best available evidence. The best available evidence was wrong because Darth Bane designed the Rule of 2 specifically to remain invisible. 2 Sith cannot be detected the way an army can. 2 Sith, working slowly and patiently across multiple generations, placing an acolyte inside a banking organization here, influencing a political movement there, building the architecture of a manufactured crisis decades in advance, are not a military threat. They are a governance problem. They are an institutional corruption. And the Jedi, trained to sense darkness in the Force, trained to respond to conflict and violence, and open confrontation with the dark side, are structurally blind to patient, quiet, invisible manipulation. Their training teaches them to look for fire. The Rule of 2 is a slow drip. This is the genius of what Bane designed, and I use the word without admiration. It is a system built on a precise understanding of the Jedi's weaknesses. Not their lack of power, not their lack of intelligence. Their specific, cultivated, institutionally reinforced inability to see what they are not looking for. The Rule of 2 turns the Jedi's own code against them. The Jedi suppress emotion, so they do not recognize the emotional manipulation Palpatine practices on Anakin as manipulation, because they have no framework for understanding emotional manipulation as a weapon. The Jedi reject attachment, so they do not understand why a man who loves his mother would do anything to protect her, including things the code forbids. The Jedi believe in the goodness of the Republic and the Senate, so the possibility that the Supreme Chancellor himself is the Sith Lord they have been looking for is quite literally unthinkable. Not difficult to think, unthinkable. When Anakin tells Mace Windu that Palpatine is the Sith Lord, when he finally says the thing he has been carrying alone, Mace does not celebrate. He does not thank Anakin. He tells him to stay in the council chamber and wait. He takes a small team of masters to the Chancellor's office. And in that moment, the thing you notice is how few of them there are. How confident. How certain that this will be straightforward. It is not straightforward. The Coruscant Temple's 5 spires cast a shadow across the city planet every morning and every evening. For 1,000 years, that shadow has been the shadow of the Jedi Order's authority. For 1,000 years, the darkness beneath the temple has waited. It is very good at waiting. It was taught to wait by a man who understood, better than anyone alive, that the Jedi's greatest vulnerability was their confidence that they had already won. There is a moment at the beginning of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi descend from space above Coruscant in the middle of a battle that is enormous and lethal and beautiful in the way large catastrophes sometimes look from a distance, and the camera finds their ships in the middle of the chaos, and for a few seconds, the two of them are just talking, casually, making small jokes, deflecting laser blasts and navigating a battlefield, and talking to each other with the easy rhythm of two people who have spent so many years in danger together that danger has become simply the medium they communicate in. It is the last time we see them like that. Revenge of the Sith, released on May 19, 2005, is the story of the end of everything. The Republic, the Jedi Order, Anakin Skywalker, the partnership between him and Obi-Wan, the life of Padme Amidala, the hope of every single being who believed the Jedi were guardians of a civilization worth protecting. Everything ends, not quickly, methodically, with terrible deliberateness. The film takes apart what the previous 2 films built. The specific mechanism of the Jedi's destruction is Order 66, a contingency program embedded in the clone troopers who serve alongside the Jedi across every battlefront of the Clone Wars. The clones were created by the Kaminoans, engineered to be obedient to the Republic and the Chancellor, and given biochips, implants developed in secret under Palpatine's direction. The chips are not a crude override. They are precise. When activated, they do not make the clone troopers violent across the board, do not make them confused or erratic, do not produce any outward sign that anything has changed. They simply produce a single, absolute imperative: kill Jedi. Everything else remains normal. The chip activates. The Jedi standing next to you, the one whose orders you have been following, the one you have been fighting alongside for years, becomes the target. You turn around, you fire. The Jedi spent the entire Clone Wars relying on clone soldiers, living alongside them, commanding them. Some Jedi formed genuine bonds with their units, not just professional relationships, but something that, had the Jedi Code allowed them to name it, might have been called friendship. Plo Koon, one of the senior Jedi Masters, was known for treating the clones under his command as people rather than equipment. He remembered their names. He asked about them. He was the kind of Jedi the clones talked about with something that sounded like loyalty, the kind that goes beyond obedience. Depa Billaba had a Padawan named Caleb Doom who would later take the name Kanan Jarrus. She led her unit from the front, beside them, in the way the best field commanders do. Her clones knew her. She knew them. When Order 66 activates, none of that matters. Not because the clones are bad people. The show The Bad Batch and the final season of the Clone Wars make clear that some of the clones resist, that the chips are the mechanism rather than the choice, that individual clones can act against the Order when their chip has been removed or is defective. Most of them cannot. The chip does not care about the bond. The chip does not know that Plo Koon remembers your name. Plo Koon dies on Cato Neimoidia. His starfighter is shot down by the clone pilots flying at his side, pilots he has flown with, trained with. There is no warning. Ki-Adi-Mundi dies on Megiddo, surrounded by clone soldiers who lower their rifles and open fire while he is moving forward, mid-strategy, thinking about the engagement ahead. He has a second to ignite his lightsaber. A few seconds to deflect before they overwhelm him, and then he is gone. Aayla Secura dies on Felucia in a burst of fire so dense and sudden that the scene in the film lasts approximately 4 seconds from the moment the clones turn to the moment she falls. She does not fight back. There is nothing to fight. There is no time. These deaths are not shown with music designed to tell you how to feel. The film moves through them quickly, cutting between battlefields across the galaxy, the same pattern repeating. A Jedi, a clone unit, the moment when the clones' movements change, and then the sound of blasters. The score under these scenes is quiet. George Lucas and composer John Williams understood that the quieter they played these deaths, the more devastating they would land. The film does not ask you to grieve, it just shows you what happened, and trusts you to feel it without being directed. At the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker, now Darth Vader, though he has not yet put on the armor, leads the 501st Legion through the building he has lived in since he was 9 years old. The hallways he walked as a Padawan, the training rooms where he practiced, the archives where he studied, the council chamber where he was denied the rank of master only weeks ago. He knows this building. He walks through it now, at the head of soldiers who are there to kill everyone inside. The film does not show what happens to the younglings inside the temple. There is a scene where a group of children find Anakin in the hall, and one of them asks him, with the straightforward trust of a child who still believes the Jedi are safe, if he is there to help them. The film cuts away before the answer. It shows the smoke rising above the temple's spires from across the city, the orange glow behind the windows. The knowledge that Anakin Skywalker, who grew up in that building, walked its halls and knew its classrooms, is walking them again. Yoda is on Kashyyyk when Order 66 is triggered. He is deep in the forest, commanding Wookiee forces alongside clone troops, coordinating a ground engagement. He senses something through the Force, a moment before Commander Gree and another clone trooper raise their rifles behind him, not in time to prevent it, in time to turn, ignite his lightsaber, and take their weapons away before they can fire. He stands there in the forest of Kashyyyk, holding what just happened. The Force is full of death, hundreds of deaths all at once, each one a light going out, each one a voice he has known for decades or years, or even just the brief span of a Clone War deployment going silent. He goes very still. He closes his eyes. He does not collapse. He does not cry. He takes 2 Wookiees, Chewbacca and a great warrior called Tarful, and he escapes. He will process what he just felt later. Right now, he has to survive. Obi-Wan is on Utapau, directing the hunt for General Grievous, when Clone Commander Cody receives the order. Obi-Wan falls, shot off a cliff into a lake below by the man he has been commanding, the man whose helmet he handed back only an hour before with a small joke. He survives because the fall is far and the lake is deep. He surfaces in the dark, alone, in a galaxy that has just changed entirely. The aftermath of the night, the first terrible hours of what will become 19 years, moves quickly in the film, because the film has to reach the twins' births before its end. What matters for this story is what Obi-Wan and Yoda decide when they find each other again, brought together by Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan, who is himself still reeling from what the Senate has just done. Applauded Palpatine's proclamation of the Galactic Empire, given him everything he asked for, done it willingly. They board a Jedi cruiser. They are possibly the last senior Jedi alive. They go back to Coruscant. What they find at the temple is a disaster. Hundreds of Jedi dead. The building occupied by Imperial forces, already in the process of being repurposed. And the Order's emergency distress signal, the transmission network through which the Order could reach its members anywhere in the galaxy, the lifeline designed to call Jedi home in a crisis, still transmitting. Palpatine has altered it. He is using the system designed to save Jedi as a trap to draw the surviving ones in. Obi-Wan goes into the temple. He reaches the signal and changes it, not back to what it was, because calling every surviving Jedi to Coruscant would be sending them to their deaths, but to something new, a warning. Stay away, scatter, do not come here, disperse. There is no order to come home to. There is no home. He also watches a recording of the temple's security footage. He watches what happened there. He watches Anakin Skywalker walk through the halls. He watches what Anakin does. He asks Yoda not to make him do it. Yoda tells him he must. And then Obi-Wan goes to Mustafar, where Anakin has just committed the worst act of his life, and the two of them have the fight that neither of them wanted. In a landscape that is all fire and black rock, the planet itself burning beneath them, the sky full of smoke. The fight lasts a long time. It ends the only way it can end, with Obi-Wan having the higher ground, Anakin having lost most of what he had, and Obi-Wan unable to finish it. He leaves. He cannot do it. He cannot kill Anakin Skywalker. He takes Anakin's lightsaber and he leaves him on the bank of a lava river, burning. The order that the Prime Jedi built 25,000 years ago on Ahch-To ends on this night. It ends not with a battle in the traditional sense, but with 1,000 deaths across a galaxy-spanning betrayal, and two men who loved each other as master and student, standing on opposite sides of a fire that neither of them set and both of them fed. The years of exile are long. Obi-Wan Kenobi spends 19 years on Tatooine. He lives as a hermit in the Jundland wastes under a name that is not his name, Ben. He watches a child grow up on a moisture farm across the desert, a child whose father he fought on a burning planet and could not kill and could not save. He does not use the Force if he can avoid it. He does not ignite a lightsaber in public. He keeps a presence so contained that the locals think of him as just an eccentric old man who lives alone in the hills and occasionally does strange things. 19 years. He is in his mid-30s when he arrives on Tatooine, and in his mid-50s when Luke Skywalker walks into his home. That is the arithmetic of exile. Half a career spent in a desert. What Obi-Wan does during those 19 years, beyond watching Luke, beyond staying hidden, is something revealed in the closing moments of Revenge of the Sith and expanded in subsequent canonical material. He communes with Qui-Gon Jinn. His master, killed by Darth Maul on Naboo in The Phantom Menace, has, during the years between his death and Obi-Wan's exile, learned something that the Jedi Order never formally taught, never included in any of its curricula, never considered a legitimate area of study: how to maintain consciousness after death. The technique is called, in various canonical and legends contexts, preservation of consciousness, or the path to becoming one with the Force while retaining individuality. It is the most profound thing in Star Wars metaphysics. Every being, when they die, becomes one with the Force. The energy that animated the body returns to the whole. What the technique Qui-Gon mastered allows is for that return to preserve the self, to remain, as Obi-Wan does when he appears to Luke after his death, as a presence, a voice, a coherent entity that can communicate and teach and accompany. The Jedi Order had the code for 25,000 years. It had the archives. It had generation after generation of brilliant Force-sensitive scholars studying every dimension of the Force they could access, and not one of them figured this out. Qui-Gon Jinn figured it out alone. He was, in many ways, the Jedi who fit the Order's template least comfortably. He believed in the living Force, the Force as it exists in the present moment, in the specific living things around you, rather than in abstract principles or long-term strategies. He was the one who found Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine and saw what the Jedi Council could not. Not a dangerous child to be cautious about, but the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. He was the one who took the prophecy seriously when the Council dismissed it. He lost the argument in his lifetime. He was right. And after his death, following his own instincts about the Force, rather than the Order's institutional framework, he found the door that the Order did not know existed. He taught Yoda, in Yoda's exile on Dagobah. Yoda taught Obi-Wan, in Obi-Wan's exile on Tatooine. The chain of two, a mirror image of the rule of two, not master and apprentice in the Sith tradition, but teacher and student across the boundary of death. The Order's knowledge evolving in exile, in ways it never evolved during its millennia of institutional existence. There is something specific about that worth sitting with. The most important discovery in the history of Force understanding, the ability of a Jedi to persist after death, to continue teaching, to speak from the other side of mortality, was not made by the Order at its height. It was not made in the Jedi archives, or the Council chamber, or any of the formal structures of the institution. It was made by a single Jedi who trusted his own perception over the Order's consensus, following a thread of understanding that the consensus had decided was not worth following. In exile, after death, Yoda on Dagobah spends his exile differently than Obi-Wan spends his. He meditates. He communes with the Force in the deep, strange, humid darkness of a swamp world, whose strong Force presence masks his own, makes him invisible to the Empire's Inquisitors, to the machinery of the dark side that scours the galaxy for surviving Jedi. He is approximately 877 years old when he enters exile. He has time. He uses the time. He sits with what went wrong. He thinks about the code and what it produced. He thinks about Anakin Skywalker and what the Order's handling of that boy, the rejection at 9 years old, the training, the denial of every attachment, produced. He thinks about the pride the Order carried, the certainty it wore, the way it confused confidence with wisdom, the way it looked at Palpatine for decades and saw a friendly ally rather than the most dangerous being in the galaxy. He thinks. He waits. He does not stop being Yoda, still wise, still sharp, still capable of the kind of compressed, precise statement that contains more truth than a paragraph. But he is thinking thoughts that the Yoda who sat on the High Council would not have allowed himself to think. When Luke Skywalker arrives on Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda's initial resistance to training him is not performance. He genuinely debates it. He has spent 20 years revising his understanding of what the Order did wrong, and the revision does not give him confidence that repeating the process with this specific student, older than any initiate the Order would have accepted, attached to everything, impulsive, not a natural candidate by any metric the Order used, is a good idea. He says it directly. Too old to begin the training, reckless, dangerous. He starts training Luke anyway, partly because Obi-Wan asks him to, partly because the Force is clearly pointing at this situation. And partly, I think, because Yoda has spent 20 years on a swamp planet understanding that the Order's metrics were wrong, and at some level he knows that a candidate who fails to meet those metrics might be exactly what the Order's revised understanding should be looking for. He teaches Luke differently than the Order taught. Not completely differently. The techniques, the forms, the understanding of the Force as something to move through rather than something to control. These persist, but the relational quality is different. Yoda does not tell Luke his feelings are not real. He warns him about the fear he feels, the anger, the aggression, but he warns him about them as dangers to navigate, not as defects to eliminate. He says Luke must confront Vader, not avoid the darkness, but confront it. The confrontation on Bespin, in Cloud City, does not go the way Yoda hoped. Luke goes before he is ready, driven by the attachment Yoda warned him about, the love he feels for Han and Leia, the need to protect them, the feeling the code would have trained out of him if he had been taken young. He goes, and he loses, and he finds out who his father is while his hand is on the floor, severed, and his whole identity is rearranging itself around the fact. He survives, barely, and what he carries away from Bespin is not just the scar and the prosthetic hand. It is the question that the next film will require him to answer. What does it mean to confront the darkness in your own bloodline, in your own nature, and not be consumed by it? There is also Ahsoka Tano, who exists in this period in a space the Jedi Order never quite developed vocabulary for. Ahsoka was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan through most of the Clone Wars. She was assigned to him by the Jedi Council in a move that most viewers read, correctly, as the Council giving Anakin a teaching responsibility he was not ready for, because they hoped it would mature him. She was young, brash, confident in ways that were real and ways that were still forming. She and Anakin were more like partners than master and apprentice, partly because Anakin was 21 years old and in no position to be anyone's teacher, and partly because they genuinely understood each other at a level that neither of them fully had with anyone else in the Order. In the 5th season of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka is expelled from the Jedi Order under false accusations of treason. The Order moves against her quickly, confidently, wrongly. When the truth emerges and she is exonerated, the Council offers her reinstatement. She considers it. She hands back her lightsabers and walks away. She does not quit because she stops believing in the Force. She quits because she stops believing the institution is a reliable vehicle for what the Force actually asks of a person. She is 17 years old when she makes this decision. She will spend the next several decades of her life living out what she understood at 17, which is that the Force does not require the Order to be real, that the Jedi were right about the center, that you can serve the Force without pledging yourself to the institution that claims to represent it. When Order 66 comes, Ahsoka is not a Jedi. Her name is not on Palpatine's list. She survives not because she is overlooked, but because she has already stepped outside the category that the Order targets. She goes into hiding. She fights in the early rebellion under a false name. She survives. She becomes, over the following years, one of the most powerful Force users alive, trained in no current tradition, owing allegiance to no council, answering to nothing but the Force itself. She is the closest thing the galaxy has, in the dark years of the Empire, to a Jedi, someone who stands between the poles, who carries the full Force rather than half of it, who does not need an institution to tell her what the Force is asking. What the survivors carry during the Empire's reign is not just hidden knowledge or preserved technique. They carry the memory of failure, which is the most uncomfortable thing to carry, because it demands that you understand what went wrong, rather than simply what was lost. Obi-Wan knows what went wrong. Yoda knows what went wrong. Ahsoka knows what went wrong, in a way that is sharper for being personal, for having happened to her specifically before the larger catastrophe happened to everyone. The question that the Empire's 2 decades of darkness poses to all of them is whether knowing what went wrong is enough to change what comes next, whether a tradition can revise itself while in exile, whether the understanding that Qui-Gon Jinn carried, the living Force, the present moment, the individual before the institution, can be passed on not in the form of a new code, but in the form of something humbler and more alive. Something that does not replace the error with a different error, but leaves space for the thing that was always true. There is a moment in The Last Jedi, a different moment than the Mosaic, earlier in the film, before Luke has softened, where Luke tells Rey what the Jedi Order actually was. He is angry, and his anger makes him more honest than he would be if he were trying to perform wisdom. The legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, hubris. He does not say this to wound her. He says it because he believes it, because he has spent years on Ahch-To arriving at that conclusion, because the evidence for it is the thing he cannot get away from. The Order failed Anakin Skywalker. He failed Ben Solo. The failure is structural and repeating, and he cannot see how rebuilding the same structure will produce a different result. He tried to rebuild. He spent years after Return of the Jedi, gathering Force-sensitive individuals from across the galaxy, people who could feel the Force and had no formal tradition, who were open to learning, who needed what the Jedi had to offer and nothing else they carried. He trained them. He built something small but genuine, a community rather than an institution, closer in spirit to the early Je'daii on Tython than to the High Council chambers on Coruscant. Among his students was Ben Solo, the son of Leia Organa and Han Solo, the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, the most powerful Force-sensitive of his generation, powerful enough that Luke could feel the immensity of it, even in the early stages of training, a vastness in the Force that Ben himself seemed barely aware of, that surrounded him the way the ocean surrounds an island, too large to see from the inside. Luke could also feel something else, darkness in Ben, a shadow that was not just the natural complexity of a powerful Force user, but something specific, something growing. He could feel the influence that Snoke, the supreme leader of the First Order, a being of enormous dark side power whose true nature would not be revealed until much later, was already exercising on his nephew, reaching across the distance through the Force, finding the places in Ben Solo where doubt and longing and the weight of his grandfather's name had made him vulnerable. Luke tells this story twice in The Last Jedi. The first time, he tells it to Rey, and in his version he went to Ben's hut to confront him, saw in Ben's sleeping mind the full scope of the darkness and the destruction it would cause, and for one moment, one terrible, instinctive, unbearable moment, he ignited his lightsaber. The second time, he tells the story to Rey again, and this time he does not hide from the first version's incompleteness. He went to Ben's hut. He looked into Ben's sleeping mind. He felt what was growing there, and for that one moment, he ignited his lightsaber. Ben was already awake. He had felt Luke enter. He saw his uncle standing over him, weapon lit, and he made the only interpretation available. The one person in his life who represented the Jedi Order, the one person who had known his grandfather and seemed to have survived that knowledge, was about to kill him. Kylo Ren is not a person who chose darkness. That is the film's most honest statement and its cruelest one. He is a person who was pushed out of the light by a moment of terrible, irreversible miscommunication between himself and the only Jedi he had ever trusted. Luke's guilt about that moment is the engine of the entire film. It is why he came to Ahch-To to die. It is why he tells Rey the Jedi must end. It is why, when he finally does act in the film's climactic scene, projecting himself across the galaxy to stand between the Resistance and Kylo Ren's forces, he does it as pure sacrifice, as a giving rather than a taking, as the opposite of the 1 second 20 years ago when he reached for taking and lost everything. The temple falls. The students either die or follow Ben into the First Order and become the Knights of Ren. Luke goes to the first Jedi Temple and sits with it. He sits with the Mosaic. He does not meditate on it in any productive way. He is not integrating the wisdom it shows, not finding peace in it. He is hiding near it, behind the walls of the oldest building in the galaxy, hoping that the weight of 25,000 years of history will simply fall on top of him and press him into stillness. Think about what that means for the longer arc we have been tracing through this essay. The Jedi Order, starting from the Je'daii on Tython 36,000 years ago, has spent its entire existence trying to preserve and pass on something it understood imperfectly and applied worse. Every generation has made the same class of mistake, reaching for elimination when the task was balance, reaching for control when the task was presence, reaching for the weapon when the task was stillness. The order that the Prime Jedi built from balance became, over millennia, an institution that could not tolerate balance, because balance meant acknowledging the dark side as real. Luke Skywalker, on that island, finally understands this. He has read the ancient texts in the Temple library. He has felt the dark side nexus in the cave below the cliffs. He has sat next to the Mosaic for years. He knows what the first Jedi knew. He also knows that he replicated the Order's failure with his own students, and that the failure is not a bug in the system. It is the system. That any attempt to rebuild the Order with the same structure will produce the same result. He is right about the analysis. He is wrong about the conclusion. Destroying the last remaining Jedi texts so that no one can rebuild anything is not wisdom. It is the most extreme form of the same old error, trying to resolve the tension by eliminating one side of it. This time not by eliminating the dark side, but by eliminating the tradition entirely. Yoda shows up. He has been dead for years, present now only as the blue shimmer of a Force ghost, the technique that Qui-Gon discovered and passed down, the ability the Order never formally developed until it was too late for the Order to benefit from it. He appears to Luke, and when Luke stands in front of the tree that houses the ancient texts, clearly about to burn them, Yoda calls the lightning himself, burns the tree, burns the texts. The texts are not in the tree anymore. Rey has them. They are on the Millennium Falcon, folded into a satchel. The most ancient knowledge in the galaxy, safe. But Yoda's point is something larger than the fate of the texts. He tells Luke that failure is the greatest teacher, that there is nothing in those books that Rey does not already have, that a Jedi Master's job is to love the students enough to set them free into their own understanding of the Force, not to replicate yourself, not to build an institution in your image, but to help someone else find their own path to the center. That is the thing Odan-Urr's code could not contain, the thing the Jedi understood and the Jedi forgot. The center is not a doctrine you can write down and enforce. It is a place inside a person that they have to find for themselves. You can point them toward it. You can walk with them for a while, but you cannot sit at the center for them, and you cannot force them to stay there once they arrive. You can only tell them what you know about it, and trust them. Luke trusts Rey with that. He sends himself across the galaxy in his final act, a Force projection, a manifestation of the light side so complete and so costly that it requires everything he has and more than he can actually give. He appears on the planet Crate, stands in the salt flats between Kylo Ren's forces and the Resistance, and he gives the survivors time to escape. He says goodbye to Leia. He says goodbye, quietly, in a way that Kylo cannot see, to his own failure. He tells Kylo that he is not the Last Jedi. He is not angry when he says it. He is not performing. He is just telling the truth. She is not the Last Jedi. She is the next one. Whatever she builds from the ruins of what he left her will be different from what he built, and different from what the Order was. Because she came to the Force from outside every tradition, because she has read the ancient texts, and felt the dark cave and held the dark side, and not been consumed by it. And because Luke, in his final act, in the projection across the galaxy, in the years on Ahch-To that shaped her by proximity even as he refused to teach her, gave her the most important thing a teacher can give. He showed her what not to be afraid of. The story of the Jedi Order is often told as a tragedy. The prequel trilogy frames it that way. So does most of the supplemental material, the novels, the comics, the games that explore the period between the Order's height and its destruction. The tragedy is real. The loss of the Order is real. Thousands of lives, centuries of accumulated knowledge, a tradition that at its best produced beings of genuine wisdom and genuine courage, all of it gone in a single night because a single Sith Lord was patient enough to wait for it. But there is another way to read this history, a way that does not deny the tragedy, but that looks through it at something larger. And when you look through it, the story changes. The Jedi Order, from its very beginning, was not meant to be an institution. The Prime Jedi did not build a hierarchy. They did not construct a council. They built a temple on a nexus of the Force on a remote island, sat down in front of a mosaic they made themselves, and listened. The Je'daii, on Tython, built a community of practice rather than an organization of authority, contested, imperfect, always under pressure from the planet itself, but genuinely oriented toward the center, rather than toward power or dominance, or the accumulation of institutional gravity. The original Jedi Code acknowledged that both sides of experience exist, and that the task is to hold them, not eliminate one. All of this, the mosaic, the twin moons, the yet in the original code, points towards something that was never really about an order. It was about a practice, a way of being in relation to the Force that can be done by one person on a cliff above an ocean, just as well as it can be done by 10,000 Jedi in a temple on Coruscant. The practice does not require the institution. The institution was built to protect and propagate the practice, and over thousands of years, the institution slowly replaced the practice with itself. That replacement is the tragedy, not the destruction of the Order. The destruction of the Order was a consequence of the replacement, not the replacement itself. The tragedy is that somewhere between Tython and the prequel Jedi Council, the thing the Jedi were trying to do became the thing the Jedi were trying to protect having done. The center became a history rather than a practice. The balance became a record rather than a reality. Odan-Urr's code revision is the hinge moment, the point where the shift becomes structurally encoded. Before, emotion, yet peace, the tension acknowledged. After, there is no emotion, there is peace, the tension denied. Before, a code that asks you to be honest about your experience. After, a code that asks you to declare your experience to be something other than what it is. The institution could be built on the revised code in a way it could not have been built on the original, because the original required something the institution could not provide: genuine, ongoing, individual practice of holding both sides without flinching. The revised code could be recited, could be taught, could be assessed for compliance. The original could only be lived, and institutions cannot assess whether you are living something. They can only assess whether you are saying the right words. Here is the most specific thing this history teaches, and it is worth stating plainly. The Jedi Order was not destroyed by the dark side. It was destroyed by the gap between what it taught and what it actually produced. It taught the code. It produced Jedi who had emotional realities they could not acknowledge, grief they could not process, love they could not name. Into those gaps, the gaps between the code's declarations and the actual interior lives of the people following it, Palpatine put his hands and pulled the Order apart from the inside. The dark side did not defeat the light side. The denial of the dark side defeated the light side. The two things are entirely different, and until you can see that distinction clearly, the history of the Jedi is just a story of good people who lost. Once you can see it, the history of the Jedi is a very specific warning about a very specific kind of institutional failure, the kind that happens when an organization becomes more committed to its own continuation and its own self-image than to the purpose it was founded to serve. The Jedi were founded to stand at the center. The Jedi Order became an institution with a center. That is not the same thing. Rey, at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, stands on Ahch-To and takes a new name. An old woman asks her what her name is, and she says, Skywalker. Not Palpatine, her biological family, not any Jedi title or lineage. Skywalker, the name of the people who found her when she had nothing, who gave her something to be part of when she had no identity, who taught her about the Force through their own flawed, human, attachment-saturated lives. She buries the lightsabers of Luke and Leia in the sand at the edge of the island. The old woman watches, the Lanai caretaker who has tended this place for generations, who has walked past the Mosaic 10,000 times, who has never been told what she is maintaining. Rey turns and looks at the twin suns going down over the ocean. The island looks the same as it always has. The temple is there, the cliff is there, the Mosaic is there, inside, the Prime Jedi, seated, dark stone on one side, light stone on the other, 25,000 years of staying exactly the same, while everything built around it rose and fell and rose again. In the current canon, the future of the Force tradition after the rise of Skywalker remains largely unwritten. There are stories being told in the years after the Skywalker saga, comics, audio dramas, glimpses of what the galaxy looks like when the First Order is gone and the New Republic is beginning again. What Rey builds from the ruins of what Luke left her. What the Force does with the person who stood at the center of both the light and the dark and came out the other side. These are open questions. The stories have not been told yet, which is, perhaps, the right place to leave it. Not with an answer, not with a new institution or a new code or a new set of rules about what a Jedi feels. With a person standing on an island above the sea, looking at the twin suns, having just buried 2 lightsabers in the sand and chosen a name. With a beginning. Because that is what this whole history turns out to be, if you read it long enough, and stay with it long enough, and let its weight accumulate fully. Not a story of an order that rose and fell, but a story of an idea that the order kept almost managing to hold. Balance, the center. 2 sides of the Force, and a person with the courage to stand between them without choosing. The Prime Jedi understood it. The Je'daii understood it. The original code contained it. Somewhere in the long centuries between the First Temple and the Last, the understanding was lost, not destroyed, not refuted, just slowly moved to the margins, covered over by revision and institution, and the accumulated weight of being right about so many things that the one thing they were wrong about became impossible to see. That one thing was simple. It was always simple. It is the thing the Mosaic shows, and the twin moons of Tython named, and the dark cave on Ahch-To demonstrates, in the most direct way possible. The dark side is not the enemy. Imbalance is the enemy. The dark side is part of the Force, and the Force is whole, and the Jedi's purpose, the actual purpose, the one the first Jedi understood when they sat down on an island above an ancient ocean and tried to listen, was never to defeat the dark. It was to hold both sides in balance, to stand at the center, to be the place where the light and the dark meet without either one winning. For 25,000 years, the galaxy waited for someone who could do that. Not a master, not a council, not an order. A person, standing on an island, watching the suns go down. There is a mosaic on the wall of the oldest building in the galaxy. The building is mostly ruins now, or close to it. The Lanai caretakers who tend the island on Ahch-To keep the grounds, keep the pathways, keep the walls from collapsing entirely into the cliff. They have done this for as long as their community has memory. They do not know what the building was. They know that it matters. Inside, the mosaic is unchanged. The Prime Jedi sits in the center of a circle, dark stone on one side, pale stone on the other. The figure is patient, still. The eyes, if there are eyes, are closed. Whatever the Prime Jedi is doing, they have been doing it for 25,000 years, through the founding and the fracture of the Jedi Order, through the 100-year darkness and the birth of the Sith, through the Great Hyperspace War and the thousands of years of conflict that followed, through the High Republic's rise and the first shadows of its end, through the Battle of Ruusan and the 1,000 years of silence after it, through Order 66 and the Great Purge, through Luke Skywalker's attempt and its collapse, through the First Order and the Resistance, and everything that followed. The mosaic does not change. The center holds. Dark on one side, light on the other, and the figure between them, not choosing, not fighting, just present. The Jedi Order built 25,000 years of civilization trying to get back to what that mosaic shows. They came close, sometimes. At their best, in the individual Jedi who trusted their instincts over the Council's consensus, in the Jedi philosopher standing on a cliff under two moons, in Luke Skywalker dying in peace on a clifftop above the same sea. They touched it. They understood it. They lived it, briefly, incompletely, in the gaps between the Code's declarations. The Force does not require an order. It never did. It required someone willing to sit still long enough to feel it. All of it. Both sides. The warmth of Ashla